The offensive line didn't just break down, it vanished. In a game where Shedeur Sanders led the team in rushing with just 2 scrambles, the depth of the Browns' structural issues became undeniable. Pass protection was non-existent, and the run game failed to launch, leaving Sanders to invent offense under constant duress. Jeudy's drops only amplified the collapse, stripping away what little rhythm the unit could find. This wasn't a quarterback struggling, it was a system cracking under its own weight. What we saw wasn't about one player's mistakes, it was about organizational failure. Sanders stood tall in a crumbling pocket, made difficult throws and kept attacking even when the scoreboard and sideline said otherwise. The game exposed how fragile this team's offensive identity really is. Until that gets fixed.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Starting with coaching and accountability, no quarterback, no matter how talented, will thrive. Shedeur Sanders took the field against the Chicago Bears with the kind of pressure that would rattle most rookies. 3 interceptions later, the scoreboard was brutal, but the story was anything but simple. What unfolded wasn't a collapse of talent, it was a collapse of everything around him. And front and center in that mess? Jeudy. The veteran receiver turned in one of the most error-filled performances of the game, repeatedly dropping crucial passes, cutting routes awkwardly, and leaving Sanders hanging with no backup. It wasn't just 1 or 2 slips. This was a pattern throughout the night. On multiple drives, Jeudy was in position to extend plays or move the chains, only to let the ball clank off his hands or fall out of bounds. Each drop felt heavier than the last, because with every blown opportunity the pressure on Sanders doubled. You could see it, the frustration mounting, the sideline reactions, the subtle changes in Sanders' body language. But he didn't unravel. He kept going. Sanders' stat line was tough to defend on paper. But for those watching closely, the situation told a different story. He was under siege almost every snap. The offensive line might as well have been air. No protection, no time, and certainly no consistent run game to balance out the chaos. On several plays, Sanders was scrambling for his life before he could even finish his dropback. Despite the heat, he delivered some serious throws, deep balls on a rope, tight window passes under pressure. He stayed composed, didn't lash out, didn't fold. That alone said something. But it also highlighted a bigger problem. Why was a rookie quarterback expected to carry this much weight, especially when seasoned veterans like Jeudy weren't doing their jobs? Kevin Stefanski's fingerprints were all over this loss. The offensive coordinator's game plan never adapted. Even as the line collapsed, even as Jeudy kept dropping passes, Stefanski doubled down on a game plan that clearly wasn't working. No designed rollouts to help Sanders escape the rush. No tempo changes. No creative play calling to shake the Bears' defense. Instead, it was more of the same, run plays that went nowhere, routes that took too long to develop, and zero adjustments to the reality on the field. If Sanders looked isolated, it's because he was. The coaching staff left him out there with a flawed scheme and crossed their fingers. It backfired. In a twisted way, Sanders' ability to keep his cool through this disaster might be the most impressive part. He didn't melt down on the sideline. He didn't start throwing blame. Even after that 3rd interception, he got right back to it. That's what stood out. And let's talk about that rushing stat. Sanders led the team in rushing with just 2 carries. That's not just ironic, it's a warning sign. Your quarterback shouldn't be your most effective runner by accident. That speaks to a broken run game, a useless O-line, and a coaching staff that failed to prepare for a game they knew would be hostile. After the game, Stefanski offered the usual vague answers. Talked about needing to watch the tape and clean up mistakes. But that's not what anyone wanted to hear. What people wanted was accountability. Why was the game plan so predictable? Why were there no adjustments after the first half? And most of all, why wasn't there more done to support your rookie quarterback who was clearly drowning in pressure? The fans saw it. The media saw it. Even the opposing defense probably knew Sanders was flying solo out there. The post-game platitudes didn't help. They only confirmed what had been obvious all game. This staff had no answers. And then there's Jeudy. His post-game remarks were anything but reassuring. No real ownership of the drops. No acknowledgement of the impact they had. Instead, it was vague talk about executing better and focusing on the next one. But this wasn't a one-off bad night. This was a pattern that's been creeping into his performances more and more. When a wide receiver can't be trusted in big moments, the entire offense stalls. Sanders was trying to build momentum, trying to establish chemistry. Jeudy gave him nothing. And it's not just about stats. It's about trust. If a rookie QB can't trust his top receiver, the whole system breaks down before it even starts. Sanders, for his part, didn't throw anyone under the bus. He kept his comments professional, focused on what he could control. He talked about execution, staying locked in, and continuing to grow. That maturity is rare, especially for someone carrying more than his fair share of the blame. You could tell he wanted more. More from himself, more from the team, more from the game plan. But he wasn't going to say it. Still, the disappointment was there. You could hear it in the pauses, the careful phrasing. He knows what's holding him back, even if he won't say it out loud. Stefanski's media rounds the following week didn't do him any favors. Recycled phrases, soft-focus positivity, and an unwillingness to admit the offensive design just didn't work. The man is clearly under pressure, but he's still clinging to a system that doesn't serve his current personnel. This wasn't just a loss, it was a showcase of how not to develop a young quarterback. There were no designed safety nets, no simplified reads, no protective game flow. Sanders was given a broken system and told to make it work. He did what he could. Stefanski. At one point during the second half, Sanders was briefly seen on the sideline with his head down. No theatrics. No throwing helmets. Just sitting, processing, dealing. It was one of those moments that said everything. Not frustration with himself, but frustration with a team that wasn't meeting him halfway. There's only so much a young quarterback can do when his support system crumbles. Drops. Protection breakdowns. A defense that couldn't buy a third down stop. Sanders wasn't sulking, he was recalibrating. And then he went back out there and kept throwing. That says a lot more than any speech could. This loss wasn't just another bad game for the Browns, it was a referendum on how the organization is managing its future. Coaching decisions, player discipline, offensive identity, all of it looked like it was unraveling in real time. Sanders' 3 interceptions will live on in the box score, but they don't tell the real story. This is about a team with no long-term vision, no cohesion, and no idea how to protect its most important asset. Blaming Sanders is easy, but it's lazy. The bigger question is why a franchise keeps putting him in this position week after week. That's where the real accountability needs to start. He's not perfect, no one is saying that. But his raw ability, poise, and mental toughness are exactly what you want in a young quarterback. The problem is, potential doesn't mean anything if the people around you can't do their jobs. The Browns are running out of excuses, and fans are running out of patience. So what do you think? Is the coaching staff doing enough to help Shedeur Sanders succeed, or are they just setting him up to fail? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like if you're tired of the same old Browns drama, and don't forget to subscribe for more breakdowns like this. You know we'll be here the next time chaos erupts. Let's not pretend Jeudy's performance was a fluke. This wasn't just an off day, it was a continuation of a trend that's been growing louder each week. Missed routes, poor timing, mental lapses, and the worst part? It's always at the worst possible moments. 3rd and long? Drop. Red zone look? Drop. Drive-saving opportunity? Off his hands. This game just exposed what's been simmering all season. Jeudy's unreliability is starting to impact the offense at a systemic level. You can't build rhythm when your lead receiver's hands are a coin toss. And for Sanders, who's trying to establish timing and trust in his reads, that instability is a nightmare. Now let's talk coaching again. Because once wasn't enough. The blame game has to circle back to Kevin Stefanski. How do you allow this kind of dysfunction to keep happening? How do you roll out the same game plan week after week, knowing it's setting your quarterback up for failure? There were 0 meaningful adjustments. No shift in tempo. No motion-based confusion to help create easier looks. Just copy-paste from previous disasters. Stefanski looked less like a play caller and more like someone trying to run out the clock on accountability. And the cracks in leadership are starting to show, loudly. This isn't the same Shedeur Sanders we saw back in preseason. That version was raw, sure, but he had zip, confidence, fire. Now, you can see the weight he's carrying. He's second-guessing. Not because he lacks talent, but because he's constantly having to overcompensate for everything around him. He's throwing into tighter windows because receivers aren't separating. He's bailing out of clean pockets because the last 7 times he got blindsided. It's not development, it's survival. And that's not how you bring along a future franchise quarterback. That's how you ruin one. When Jeudy finally addressed the media, it was all surface level. We just didn't execute. No mention of the drops. No mention of how they killed momentum. And certainly no ownership of the impact it had on Sanders' confidence. It's not about being perfect. It's about accountability. And from a veteran, that silence was deafening. A young QB needs support, not vague platitudes. And if Jeudy's not going to show up when it matters, or speak up afterward, then what exactly is he doing on the roster? Stefanski kept up the usual facade. We trust our process. But what process? Because from the outside, it looks like a broken wheel spinning in place. There's no evolution, no creativity. Just the same tired run plays, the same passive formations, and the same blind faith that it'll all magically click. But this is the NFL. Magical thinking gets you fired. And while Stefanski's job might still be safe for now, it's games like this that plant seeds that grow into questions. And those questions aren't going away anytime soon. Shedeur finally gave his thoughts, and as usual, he was composed. Almost too composed. I need to be better. We need to be better. He took responsibility even when it wasn't his to take. That's leadership, sure. But it's also a bit tragic. Because the people who should be protecting him, his line, his OC, his receivers, are the ones putting him in harm's way. And the fact that Sanders still stood up there and carried the weight? It tells you everything you need to know about who's growing and who's just coasting. The Browns have a way of making dysfunction feel like routine. This isn't just a bad stretch, it's a culture issue. The team lacks identity, and that's the real danger. You can fix mechanics. You can tweak a playbook. But if the locker room doesn't believe in the plan, it falls apart. Fast. There's no unity. No sense of everyone pulling in the same direction. You've got a rookie quarterback giving everything, while veterans jog through routes and coaches fold under pressure. It's a recipe for implosion. And the fans? They've seen this movie before. Jeudy's drops are more than just drive killers. They're momentum killers. You could feel it every time the ball slipped through his fingers. The crowd deflated. The sideline looked stunned. Sanders looked tired. These weren't highlight reel circus catches. These were basic, first-read throws that any starting receiver should handle. And when they're dropped, the quarterback looks like the problem, even when he isn't. That's the narrative danger. That's how you get a young talent like Sanders scapegoated. What's wild is that even in the middle of this train wreck, Sanders was showing flashes. Throws with perfect touch. Reads that showed he understood the defensive rotation. Quick processing under pressure. All the stuff you want to see from a developing QB. But here's the catch. Those flashes don't mean anything if the infrastructure isn't there. If your line collapses, your receivers don't finish plays, and your coach won't adapt, then even a generational talent would struggle. And Sanders? He's expected to carry it all while learning on the job. At the post-game podium, Stefanski looked like a man trying to hide in plain sight. The words were polished, but the subtext was chaos. He knows the pressure's coming. He knows the narrative is shifting. And unless he delivers change fast, he knows the front office is going to start asking harder questions. The thing is, this isn't just a Sanders problem. It's a system problem. The Browns are hemorrhaging opportunities because they refuse to adapt. They're wasting young talent because the leadership is allergic to evolution. And unless something gives soon, they're going to lose more than just games, they're going to lose the locker room. There was a moment late in the fourth quarter when Shedeur Sanders sat alone on the bench. Helmet off. Staring straight ahead. Not talking. Not reacting. Just sitting in the silence of a season that feels heavier by the week. You could tell, this wasn't a player sulking. This was a player calculating. Trying to figure out how much more he could give to a team that kept dropping the ball, literally and figuratively. This is the kind of moment that lives on in fan memory. A quiet, painful snapshot of what it looks like when a quarterback realizes he's doing it alone. Meanwhile, Jeudy was still dropping passes. Still misreading coverage. Still throwing off the timing of an already fragile offense. It's not just frustrating, it's becoming destructive. Every missed connection chips away at the trust needed to hold this thing together. And what's wild is that Jeudy doesn't seem fazed. No fire. No frustration. Just the same shrug after every mistake. That disconnect is dangerous. Because if Sanders is out there bleeding for every yard, and your top receiver is just sleepwalking through snaps, then the locker room is going to split. Kevin Stefanski is officially out of excuses. The leash is short and the clock is ticking. The fanbase has seen enough to know what they're watching. A team without direction, a coach without adjustments, and a quarterback being pushed into the fire without a hose. This isn't about talent. This is about preparation, execution, awareness, all of which are Stefanski's job. And right now it looks like he's mailing it in. The worst part? His scheme is dragging everyone else down with him. When you can't build around your most important player, what exactly are you? When Sanders finally spoke to media, his answers were measured. Almost too careful. You could tell he was holding back. Not from fear but out of professionalism. He knows calling out teammates gets you headlines, but it doesn't get you wins. Still, the cracks showed. We've got to be on the same page, he said. Translation? Receivers need to stop freelancing. He praised the team effort, but he didn't hide the frustration. And who could blame him? He's doing his part. And for some reason he's the only one expected to take the heat when it goes wrong. This game wasn't just another tick in the loss column. It was a full-blown alarm bell for the Cleveland Browns' future. Because if you can't recognize what you have in a young quarterback like Sanders, if you let dysfunction swallow him up, then you don't just lose a game. You lose a potential franchise savior. It's happened before. Teams that couldn't figure it out. Coaches who wasted raw talent. Roster builds that never gelled. And right now, the Browns look dangerously close to joining that list. The pieces are there. The system is not. Jeudy's post-game comments did not help. He talked about effort. He said it just wasn't our night. But where was that urgency on the field? Where was that fire when Sanders needed a chain-moving grab or a red zone spark? It's not about words. It's about action. And from Jeudy, the action has been subpar. You're not a rookie anymore. You're supposed to be a leader in that receiver room. But every mistake you make reflects back onto the quarterback. And when you're unreliable, the whole system wobbles. Stefanski is still trying to deflect. We'll keep working. We believe in our guys. But belief doesn't block defenders. Belief doesn't fix route-running issues. Belief doesn't scheme open passing lanes. At a certain point, you either evolve or you get left behind. Right now, the Browns' offense is stuck in the mud, and Stefanski is holding the wheel. Until he admits the game plan needs to change, nothing else will. And the longer he waits, the more damage is done. You can rewind the tape and see it. Sanders didn't give up. Not once. Even when down double digits, he kept throwing. Kept dodging blitzes. Kept trying to make something out of nothing. That resilience is what separates potential from hope. But even the toughest quarterbacks have a limit. If you keep surrounding him with inconsistency and weak leadership, that grit will turn into burnout. The clock isn't just ticking on the season, it's ticking on development. 1. You know what's worse than a dropped pass? A dropped pass on third down. You know what's worse than that? A dropped pass on third down when your team is trying to claw back into the game. That's what Jeudy delivered. Over and over. Every failed conversion felt like a dagger. And they weren't all tough grabs. Many were standard NFL throws, ball on the hands, defender behind. The kind of catches that make or break drives. And Jeudy broke them. Again. And again. Back at the mic, Stefanski looked worn down. The enthusiasm is gone. The confidence feels forced. He knows the questions are sharper now. He knows fans aren't buying it anymore. You can only run it back so many times before people call you out. The Browns' offense has become predictable, stale, and fragile. And that's not on the quarterback. That's on the guy drawing up the plan. Stefanski needs a reboot or a replacement. There's a reason Shedeur Sanders still has supporters even after a 3-interception night, because he's not folding. He's not flinching. While the box score tells a brutal story, the film tells another. A young quarterback making NFL-level reads, placing throws in impossible windows, and staying calm when everything around him is falling apart. That kind of presence doesn't come from luck. It comes from leadership. And that's what Sanders showed, even in a game stacked against him. He's not just taking hits behind a collapsing pocket. He's taking heat from fans and media, and still showing up like it's 0-0. That matters. That's growth. That's someone worth building. Jeudy, on the other hand, keeps getting chances and squandering them. When a wide receiver becomes a liability instead of a lifeline, it's time to rethink his role. Especially when your quarterback is getting blamed for the fallout. Every drop is more than a stat. It's another missed opportunity to help your guy. And yet, Jeudy is still running as WR1, still logging high snap counts and still getting targets. At some point, production has to matter more than pedigree. Because if this continues, it's not just Sanders who'll be set up to fail, it's the entire offense. The Browns cannot afford another week of this dysfunction. It's clear, Sanders needs help. From his receivers. From his coaches. From an organization that seems more reactive than proactive. If they don't step up, they're going to fumble one of the most promising rookie quarterbacks in the league. You could hear it in Shedeur Sanders' post-game voice, measured, thoughtful, but just a little bit weary. The kind of weariness that doesn't come from running for your life every snap. It comes from knowing you're doing your job while others around you are fumbling theirs. He spoke about staying composed, learning from mistakes, and trusting the process. But even in those calm responses, you could feel the weight. When a rookie quarterback is asked to carry the maturity load and the physical load, something's off. He's answering for breakdowns that aren't his. Taking hits, literal and figurative, for mistakes he didn't make. That's not development. That's damage control. Then there's Jeudy. Same press routine, different day. Talking about staying locked in and cleaning things up, but not once acknowledging how his performance torpedoed multiple drives. Not one mention of dropped passes or how those directly set Sanders up for failure. There's a difference between saying the right things and doing the right things. And Jeudy? He's saying all the things you're supposed to say. But the effort? The impact? It's not there. And fans see it. His teammates see it. The gap between Sanders' accountability and Jeudy's avoidance is a red flag the size of the stadium. This isn't just about one game. It's about the future of a franchise. The Browns cannot keep wasting potential like this. Either you fix the system and support the quarterback you say you believe in, or you watch him get crushed by a team that refuses to grow. Let us know in the comments what you think is the biggest issue holding the Browns back right now. Is it the receivers? Is it the scheme? Or is it the leadership from the top? Drop your take below, hit that like button if you're rooting for Shedeur Sanders to get a fair shot, and make sure you're subscribed, because this story is far from over. When the next collapse happens, we'll be right here breaking it all down play by play.